Hello, a very good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So this is the panel number 10 of our celebration of the Day of the Climate Professional. And the topic that we're going to discuss here today, so it's solutions for a changing climate. The main mission that we have here today is to humanize the people that are doing amazing solutions, especially because now with climate change, it may look that the challenge is too big and too far from us. And we hope by the end of this panel to show the humans behind really great ideas and how maybe you can become one of them as well. So I would like to first of all introduce you to let you know also that we have 4 panelists today. So the first one that we're going to introduce today is Elena Crete. She is from the SDSN. Nice to meet you. So Elena has an impressive background. She works as a program manager at the SDSN, which is the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. They have an impressive work, and since the 2012, under the auspices of the UN Executive Secretary General. Their main mission is to mobilize global scientific and technological expertise to promote radical solutions. I am personally one of the end users that had the privilege of benefiting from their work. So their main mission is to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, the Paris Agreement through education, research, policy analysis, and global cooperation. So I have a question for you, Elena, which is, I gave you a brief introduction, but maybe you can let us know a bit more about the SDSN initiatives to foster climate change solutions, and what are the game changes that you have known from your work there?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Fernanda, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me to this event. And congratulations. I heard we're the 10th panel, and it's been a great event so far, so I'm excited to be here. So just to give you a bit more context, so Fernanda mentioned the SDSN is working to implement the SDGs and the Paris Agreement, which is obviously a monumental task. And we don't do that as a single organization, we do it as a global network. So we currently have members at universities and knowledge-producing institutions across 1,400 member institutions. And those are organized around 40 different national and regional networks around the world, working across the range of the SDGs. My background and my interest and why we're all here today is to talk about climate, which is under SDG 13 and SDG 7. So one of the biggest projects we have participated in was our Deep Decarbonization Pathway project that actually completed in 2015, which now sounds like forever ago, but the research is still relevant and we've built a lot from it. So in that project, we worked with 16 different country teams to map out scenarios for decarbonizing their energy systems by mid-century based on whatever goals they had at that time. So for example, we did one with a team in the USA where we mapped out how could they reduce their emissions 80% by 2050 in a least cost scenario based on 1990 emissions. So through that project and working with these 16 country teams, we came up with all of these scenarios of how these governments could choose a trajectory to actually decarbonize their economies. And this was really helpful because not only were we showing how it is technically feasible to decarbonize, but we were also proving that it's economically feasible to decarbonize and basically giving policymakers, decision makers, options of what technologies are already available and how they could set their countries on trajectories to get there. Once that we had those scenarios, the Paris Agreement was signed, it was 2015, everybody was really excited. The discussion started, so how do we actually implement these? How do we take these forward? If we know the path we need to be on, how do we get there? What are some of the priorities we need to choose? And what are some of the no regret solutions? So SDSN then started a partnership with the World Business Council on Sustainable Development, or WBCSD, and ICLEI, sustainability for local governments. So with these two other networks, we started our Low Emission Solutions Conference, which we have hosted since COP22 in Marrakesh, alongside all of the COP since, and also some of the other major climate events, including the GCAS event in California a few years ago, and then the UN Secretary General's Climate Summit last year in New York. And so at these Low Emission Solutions Conference, we were putting together these multiple stakeholder panels where we could actually hear from not just researchers who are working in these specific sectors, but also the businesses who are implementing those, and then the city and civic organizations who are working with these solutions on a daily basis. So we had these really interesting panels where we were having the Monsantos of the world and the agricultural researchers of the world pretty much having arguments, but also discussing the practical solutions and what each of their roles is in bringing forward the transition for the future. So since then, we've also had several offshoots of other research projects that have come out of these conferences. And so Fernanda asked about game changers. And when I first heard that word, in my mind, leadership comes to mind, right? So I think of a game changer actually as a person. So I have had the privilege in my career and at SDSN to work with Professor Jeffrey Sachs, who is a world-leading economist and visionary, but also during our LESC events and in the DDPP project, I was able to work with Laurence Tubiana and Cristina Figueres. And when I was thinking about these three leaders as game changers and why they popped into my mind and why I enjoyed working and found so much progress working with them, I realized it's because they are all visionaries and they're optimistic. It's really easy in the climate space to get brought down by, you know, the extreme weather events, the increasing emissions, the daunting task to decarbonize in the next 10 years or 30 years. And so we are always have all this pressure on us, and it's really easy to just put your head in the sand and say, this is too much. There's too many pieces to this. There's fossil fuel interest and a lot of challenges ahead of us. But these three leaders and their participation in our events, they always start us with this hugely optimistic, we can get there, we have to get there, there's no choice but to get there. And I have, Jeff, being my boss, has really pushed me to do even things in my personal work life that I didn't think I could do, or timelines that I thought were impossible to accomplish. So I am now a climate optimist, and despite the challenges that we have at hand and the crazy world we're living in these days, I remain optimistic. I'm seeing the technologies become available. I'm seeing us start to demonstrate their feasibility and really starting to implement them at scale. We're seeing demonstration projects of carbon capture sequestration. We're seeing new agricultural practices and siting renewables on farming land, and seeing this really the stewardship of taking this agenda forward. So when I think of game changers, I think of leaders. And so I'm really excited also to be on this panel today, where I think we have a few other leaders that are going to join us here. So I'll stop there.
That is awesome. Thank you for that. I think that yes, if we are working close enough to this topic, we are seeing progress. Maybe we are a bit frustrated because they're not happening as quick as we wanted. But especially if we would take a look on what changed on the past a couple of years, it is immense, and we are in the middle of a massive crisis, and maybe for the good or for the bad, we can take this opportunity to change that. I want to make just a small addendum that came from the comments. On the climate field, you're going to listen a lot of the slangs, you know, that I usually call, you know, like SDSN, COP, SDGs. If I can say, like, just to bear with us, as soon as you start getting contacted with the field of climate, is a jungle in there, like UNFCCC, DDPP, LESC. It is immense. But if you have enough patience, like to go there, like to learn about that, you will understand. Because in the end of the day, there is an immense work behind climate action. The SDG number 13 may look like untouched, but we're doing immense work on that. YCL is like a result of this drive of making climate action a reality right now for for young people, because it is affecting our lives as we speak. So if I can like just to invite like all the young participants that are watching us, if you might be lost for a minute, because we are super enthusiastic as well. Yeah, bear with us, and like persist, and you will have there is a lot to learn, and you will be fascinated by it, hopefully. Thank you for your comments, Elena. Appreciate it. I also wanted to come right now to sorry, this time to introduce you another quite impressive work in terms of like developing solutions for climate on a really structured pathway, which is Solomon Goldstein-Rose. Look at you, my God. So how old are you, Solomon?
I'm 26 right now.
Awesome. Yes. So Solomon has an impressive background, because he's been a climate activist since the age of 11. He interned on the Obama White House and in Congress during college. He ran for the Massachusetts state legislature, and he won it at the age of 22. And since 2018, he decided to not get reelected, to invest on a project called the 100% Solution. That is a framework for how to reach negative greenhouse gas emissions worldwide by 2030. Because it looks impossible, but he wants to discuss how we can get it done. So I will leave you the floor to Solomon to tell us a bit more about the framework that you have developed in your book.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And a lot of my life has been devoted to two different aspects of this. One is raising youth voices in politics and in climate activism. And I'm in the US, and we've seen climate change really rise up the political agenda in the last couple of years because of the youth climate activist movements that have forced it to the top of the agenda. And that's really exciting. And that's a great place to plug in and continue to grow that political power. The other thing that I've been focused on, I studied engineering and have this sort of engineering mindset that I bring to public policy. And I think in terms of what can actually add up. There's a lot of rhetoric going around about how we need to start reducing emissions. But actually, we need to get all the way. The title of the book that I read from all of this research, trying to wrap my own head around the global picture, is the 100% solution. Climate change gets worse and worse until we get to net negative global emissions, eliminating emissions, because it's about the amount of the levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, not each year's additional emissions. So if we're emitting any greenhouse gases in 1 year, we're making the problem worse, even if it's less than we emitted the previous year. So we have to get on a track. It's not about reducing emissions a little as soon as we can. It's about, as fast as possible, getting on a track that gets from here to all the way to net negative emissions by 2050, which is what the scientists tell us. And so to do that, we need to shift our mindset a little bit. It's not about personal choices, as much as fossil fuel companies like you to think about your personal carbon footprint and that kind of thing. Actually, individual choices to recycle more or turn off the lights when you're not in the room are not going to add up to maybe 10% emissions reductions. That's a 10% solution, efficiency tactics. We need to get to 100% solution. So thinking in terms of collective action. It's not your personal responsibility, and this is a freeing thought, right? It's not your responsibility to solve climate change through your personal choices. You can get involved in collective action, like the youth climate activist movements, to force larger change. You can pressure companies to adopt new clean technologies, to scale up, create a market for them so that they scale up and become cheaper, and pressure governments to do the same. So we are in a moment where the world is starting to get focused on that collective action. And we need the action to be bold. We also need the action to be getting us on a track that actually adds up all the way by 2050. And that means considering all of emissions. And this is another piece that people sometimes forget. We talk about electricity or maybe electrifying transportation, but we forget about agriculture and deforestation, which is largely caused by agriculture. And that is a huge portion of emissions. We forget about industrial processes like cement that release CO2, not even just from the fossil fuels burned, but from the chemical reactions in producing cement. And we need to develop new processes for those factories. We need to do outreach to farmers to get every farmer in the world using sustainable practices that reduce emissions and sequester CO2 in the soil. So I won't get into the technical details more than to say that the 100% solution lays out the sort of the physical steps of what needs to happen to solve climate change and some of the mentality of how to think about it in terms of 100% rather than 10% solutions. And the short story is that it's quite possible and it's very exciting. Right now, 2/3 of emissions come from developing countries. And so if we want to decarbonize the world, we need to make clean equipment cheap enough to be affordable in developing countries. That means that energy is going to become cheaper. That means that more people are going to have access to energy, especially people in poor and middle income countries who don't have reliable access to energy now will have access more than they would otherwise because we're making energy cheaper. That's going to lift people out of poverty, drive economic development, drive more equality in the world. And so the process of solving climate change, which is in itself, climate change is probably the greatest global injustice of this century, but the process of solving it will also be one of the fastest economic development projects and human empowerment projects in history. And so it's very exciting and it's very possible, but we need to stop thinking in terms of our individual footprint or responsibility to change our personal behavior and think in terms of influencing collective action, getting involved in any number of ways to influence companies, influence governments, create policy action, create large-scale investments to make the clean equipment, the physical shifts that we need in infrastructure affordable worldwide. I'm going to leave it basically there. I'm also wanted to note that I talked to my publisher and created a discount for DCP attendees. If you want to use, you can buy the ebook. That's actually not the URL. Let me get you the correct URL here. I will put it up on the screen here. Nope, I won't. I will find a way to put that in the comments in a moment. But the publisher's website, if you use the code DCP, book version, you can get a discount on the book. And I would love to hear any of your thoughts, and I'm happy to converse with anyone interested in getting involved in politics, especially. You can email me, solomon@solomongr.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Solomon. Appreciate it. I wanted, before we move on, to understand a bit further what was, how you came up with the idea of writing the book, and how you came up, especially because you're such a young, and I'm assuming that you had a really great potential behind, continuing in the legislature, and what makes you decide to change that?
Good question. The Massachusetts legislature right now has a culture of inaction. And so the first step was me realizing that I was not going to, as one legislator, be able to get bold policy on the agenda. It comes from external pressures, massive movements and world events, and even then it's limited what we do right now. I think that will change and can change in the near future. But for my personal efforts on the time frame that's I realized I needed to focus more directly on the national and global side. And so when I decided to shift out of the legislature, I basically started reaching out to all of the professors and companies and other experts and activists that I could ask the state of things and figure out where are the gaps, what are the sources of emissions that people aren't talking as much about, and wrap my own head around where are we at, what needs to happen, what isn't happening that needs to happen, and try to push there. And that formed this analysis of like synthesizing the comprehensive picture, because most of the knowledge in the book is stuff that people know if they're experts in this, but it hadn't been tied together in that comprehensive way. And so that's just to wrap my own head around it. I did that and then decided to try to share that as a book and establish this
no, it
framework.
helps quite much. Yes, awesome. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I want to move then on the panel forward to one of the most exciting projects that I personally have met, which is the project Drawdown, that this time is being represented by Elizabeth Bagley. I would love to give an introduction about the Drawdown, but I'm assuming that she has a pretty interesting presentation to give her the heads up. So I will leave you the stage to you, Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here today. And yeah, as Fernanda said, I am with Project Drawdown, and I've got a few slides to share that will hopefully help kind of shed some light on the work that we do. So let's make sure. All right. So Project Drawdown was formed back in 2014. And the real question that led to the formation of this organization was, what are the solutions? I know this panel is talking specifically about solutions, but what are the solutions that we have in hand today to put climate solutions into action and to reach this moment of drawdown? We have kind of a weird name. So you might be wondering, well, what in the world is drawdown? And drawdown actually refers to a scientific term. And you all might be familiar with this. This is the curve of those heat-trapping greenhouse gases over time. And the moment of drawdown is this really specific point in future. It's a point in the future when the levels of heat-trapping gases in the atmosphere stop climbing and start to steadily decline. And that is a critical turning point for life on Earth. And it's a point that we need to reach as quickly, as safely, and as equitably as possible. But back in 2014, we didn't really know how to reach drawdown. And if you ask people even today, what do you think of when you think of climate change and global warming? About 40% of people, there's a recent survey of 14,000 people around the world, and about 40% of those people will say they think about the outcomes of climate change, things like melting icebergs and burning forests and all of the terrible, destructive things that are happening on the planet. About another 18% say they think about the causes of climate change, things like burning of fossil fuels. And only 3% of those people said that they said anything about solutions. And that's really where drawdown comes in. So to understand where the solutions are, we first want to understand what's happening. So bear with me here and imagine that this gray rectangle is a sum of all of those heat-trapping gases that humans are putting into the atmosphere every year. You might wonder, well, where are they coming from? Great question. We know, and thanks so much to Solomon for teeing it up perfectly for me to talk about this. We know that those emissions are coming from the ways in which we produce electricity, our food, agriculture, and land use sector, industry, transportation, buildings, and other energy-related emissions. So this is not the end of the story, though, and that's incredible because we have nature doing what it does all by itself really well. And so we've got these sources of emissions, but we also have sinks of emissions. These are places where the carbon is sequestered as part of the natural processes. But for those of you doing the math, there's still about 60% of those heat-trapping gases that remain in the atmosphere. And that's creating that thick blanket around our planet that's creating all of those outcomes that we think of when we think of climate change and global warming. So we know where the heat-trapping gases are coming from. We know what nature can do. This helps us identify the suite of solutions that we can implement to reach drawdown. So I want us to look first at reducing those sources. Let's turn off the tap, right? Let's stop emitting those heat-trapping gases from these sectors. So these, as you might recognize, are the same categories from the sources. We need to first, and we're going to use the 3 S's here. We'll reduce the sources of those heat-trapping gases. We also want to support the sinks. That's our second S. So sources, sinks, and society. We need to help society achieve broader transformation. So this, everybody, these are the 3 interconnected areas for action that we need to pursue globally, simultaneously, and with determination. And so at Project Drawdown, we write about this on our website, which is drawdown.org. And on that site, you can also download our latest publication. It's free. It's available both in English, French, and now Spanish as well. Apologies, we don't have Portuguese yet for the Portuguese speakers on the call. So the Drawdown Review is our latest publication that really looks at the latest and greatest in solutions. Now, so I very much invite you to check it out and to connect with Project Drawdown and the work we're doing. I also, because of what we're talking about today, want to mention that, these solutions can't work unless we have people working on them. So we're working with groups like Climate Generation out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, to really lean into green STEM professionals or climate careers all over the world. We know that these solutions only come to life if there are people behind them and people who are passionate about, who are trained and supported to put these solutions into place. So this is an image of 8 of the green STEM professionals that are highlighted in a recently released Climate Generation documentary and instructional supplement. So I highly recommend checking out this content from Climate Generation, where they really look at, when we think about this, this drawdown framework for climate solutions, what are some of the careers that fit really squarely into some of these, into the solution areas? And what are some that are peripheral? Because let's be honest, folks, we need everybody stepping up, taking action, regardless of what your career is, from an accountant to a bus driver to a wind turbine technician. We need all of you to be putting climate solutions into place across all of your careers. So with that, I will turn it back to Fernanda and see if we have any other questions.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate your presentation, Elizabeth. I want to also give the heads up about us. Maybe you guys came up here like thinking about solutions, right? And like what it is, the magic tool, like the grail to move forward. And we're putting so much in, and we're persisting, like Solomon bringing up, his book, the Project Drawdown, like that made publication and is insisting in making in other languages. I mean, SDSN focuses very much on education as well. I just want to give you the heads up that this is literally one of the first steps. As soon as you realize the challenges that we needed to bring it up, more people around with us. I am personally a result of that. I did tons of courses, and I decided to study more about that. I used the SDSN and the Project Drawdown to learn better about it, and this led me to co-found YCL. And now we have supported 300 YCL fellows around the world right now. So it is, I want to invite like all young people that are like kind of trying to understand. I really invite you to like be persistent and studying and connecting with other people that are doing amazing things as well, because at the end of the day, we are really busy. We have tons of work to do. And which is why also we came up with the Day of the Climate Professional, to bring awareness, to show who are the people behind climate action. So I really appreciate, and give it a heads up and how structured in the Project Drawdown now it is. I personally have seen it and it's really nice. So thank you for that, Elizabeth. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much, Fernanda. And thanks for everybody for tuning in to really think about ways that we can work on climate solutions, not just in our extra time, but as kind of the core of our careers. Absolutely.
Thank you for that. And to give you like a last wrap it up, because we had Project Drawdown, then we had Solomon that went to legislation, decided to create his own book. Then we entered the SDSN that is empowered by the UN. I want to bring the entrepreneur side through our last invited, that is Frederik van Deurs, all the way from Copenhagen. So we stayed most of the time in the US. So we're going to shift to the old continent for a minute or two. Actually 10, because this is your space right now, Frederick, to talk a bit further on the work of the Green Innovation Group. Frederick is the CEO of Green Innovation Group. They are based in Copenhagen with the mission to accelerate green transition by matching real needs in the private-public sector with green innovation solutions. So Frederick, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Can you confirm that you are seeing my slides? No, no sound coming through.
We are seeing. Right.
Yeah, we are. Cool, excellent, thanks. Yeah, my name is Frederick. I'm the CEO of Green Innovation Group, and I've been working with impact and with entrepreneurship for the past 13 years in various shapes and forms. So I've been running a fundraising campaign for the NGO called Oxfam IBIS, where I led a fundraising team. I've run a music studio for the rock and psychedelic rock music industry as well. I've run a company that imported machetes, and I've done all kinds of crazy things. I also did a master's in anthropology to just spice the whole thing up a little bit. But now I'm the CEO of Green Innovation Group. We started out 5.5 years ago. And today I'll tell you a little bit about the green future and how we get there and why I believe there's reason for optimism, which is luckily also what I'm hearing from the other speakers today. So a personal testimony to the Project Drawdown. That is a 100-page condensation of more than 6,000 pages from the IPCC. I cannot recommend that report warmly enough. Please go on and download that and educate yourselves if you haven't already. It's absolutely amazing. Hands down, the best piece on green innovation I have read in my entire career. So that's a compliment. Well, anyway, shit is hitting the fan, and here is why that actually matters. And as you know, cool guys don't look back at explosions, so let's try and fix it instead. If we have a global temperature rise of only 2 degrees Celsius, that would really suck. That would mean that shellfish, shrimps, oysters, mussels, they'll not be able to develop the shells that make them able to actually live and survive. And here you might ask, well, what the fuck have oysters done for me lately? And the answer is quite a lot, actually. So you may only notice them as very expensive pieces in a seafood restaurant, but in reality, these little buggers are actually cleaning our waters, both the freshwater and the saltwater, and it would really be terrible for us to not have them around. On top of that, a 2-degree global temperature rise will also double the water deficit. And, you know, that's pretty bad. We're needing water as it is. And if we double the water deficit on a global level, things are going to turn out pretty terrible. Last and not least, in only 50 years, we have killed 67% of all species on this planet. So well done, mankind. We actually really need to clean up our act. And this is not only about drawdown. It's not only about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It is also about preventing the massive loss that we're seeing in biodiversity right here, right now. But enough of the bad news. Let's go to our happy place. Who's better to take us there than the one and only Emma Bunton, the baby spice? To me, she always will put me right in the pocket, right in the happy place, because here's why there's actually reason for optimism. But before we go into that, who the fuck am I? Who am I to tell you about reasons for optimism? Well, first of all, my company, Green Innovation Group, is advising some of the major players, amongst others, Novo Nordisk, one of the biggest pharmaceutical firms in the world. We're helping them transition into the circular economy. We're working with the Danish Growth Foundation, which is a 3.3 billion euro foundation to invest in the green transition. We're working with a company such as Lyreco, that is the biggest office supplies cater in Europe. They usually say we're the biggest company you've never heard of. They have an annual revenue of 83 billion euro, and they mostly sell pens to offices. So a lot of big players are actually coming to us for advice because we have been in this space for a very long time. And we work with all kinds of technologies, amongst others, edible insects, renewable energy, robot technologies, cooling technologies. And here's where Project Drawdown and I really agree wholeheartedly on one point. One of the biggest impact potentials we have right now for reduction is actually in cooling technologies. And not a lot of people know this, but we spend insane amounts of energy cooling, and we use very inefficient technologies. And quite often we're also cooling things that don't need to be cooled. So cooling technologies is really a passion of mine. We're also working a lot with waste technology and waste treatment technologies. And we're working with companies from all over the world. This map is showing the areas where we have the highest density of solutions on our platform. We have an online platform with more than 6,000 technologies in it, where we have deep data on their revenues, on their financial needs, on their technologies, on their team distributions, etc. And as you can tell, we've reached the Southeast Asian superpowers in India and China, where the middle class is really growing fast, and the need for sustainable solutions is coming in really, really fast. The same goes for Brazil. A lot of the best solution we're seeing right now that are showing traction in the market are actually based in Europe, but that doesn't mean they don't exist anywhere else. It's just a matter of where we have been hosting most of the conferences that led us into the position we are in today. So we started out as a conference business that would connect green tech startups with investors and advisory firms. And we hosted those conferences in the countries you're seeing mapped out with orange here on the map. So basically, we're all familiar with COVID. This is the graph that we should actually have been looking at when COVID started hitting earlier in 2020. We should have been looking at what are the climate risks from business as usual compared to if sustainability would be a priority, and compare that to the capacity of planet Earth. If we just had the sanity to look at the world's capacity like this, a lot of the trouble that we're going to get into would actually be avoided. But there is another graph, and that is the graph. This is directly stolen and photocopied from the Project Drawdown report. This is the single most important mission in the history of mankind. That is reaching the point of drawdown. So this graph shows the current trajectory we are on, and it also shows the moment of drawdown. So that moment when we are pulling out more greenhouse gases from the atmosphere than we are adding into it, that's where we need to go, and we need to go there quite fast. Luckily, it's also an opportunity, and it's an opportunity for businesses. And as you all know, money makes the world go round. So I will be giving you a few examples of companies that have utilized and actually captivated value from this massive opportunity, turned it into great business that can also support us going towards net zero emissions and reaching drawdown on a global level. Because we see a few tendencies globally. We see that the price of electricity, as Solomon was also touching upon, is going towards zero. And that has to do with unsubsidized renewable sources of energy and electricity that are coming into the market, both with wind energy, with solar energy, and with hydro. So we're seeing the prices declining steadily. At the same time, we're also seeing that veganism and vegetarianism is becoming increasingly popular. And in the startup world, we're looking at hockey sticks quite often. You know, if you can represent a graph for your revenue generation that is just slightly inclining so it can turn into a hockey stick, that's what the venture capitalists want. And that is actually what we're looking at right here when we're looking at the search interest in search engines for the term veganism. And I think that is incredibly interesting, because that is something that will move us towards plant-based diets, which is another point from the Drawdown report, as well as reducing food waste, which will also be impacted by having more plant-based diets. Because if we reduce the amount of animal-based protein that's consumed on a global level, of course, we're also reducing the impact of food being wasted, since less of it will be in the more polluting animal protein kind. Well, anyway, we're also seeing that legislation and regulation is catching up. The new European Green Deal is worth 260 billion euro per year. That is a number that my Danish brain just simply cannot cope with, because we only do billion Danish kroner, which is approximately 1/8 of a euro. So this amount of money that's being pumped into green innovation is quite extraordinary, and it really means that we will see change in the coming years. So now let's move into some awesome technologies. This is an autonomous vehicle that is electrical and is being deployed in 5 different European cities to transport people around. This is just a regular building, but really what I want to say with this is that there's a platform called the Flex Platform that's developed by IBM that can use existing publicly run buildings as a heat battery for sustainable energy to balance out the energy grid. So balancing the grid when you're running on renewable energy is one of the key challenges that we need to find good solutions on. Then we have waste rocks. So these are basically made out of plastic waste that could not find a better purpose. Plastic is incredibly hard to recycle because it comes in so many different shapes and sizes. However, this company has found a way to recycle plastic into these rock-like substances that can be used for concrete. So they require less water, they emit less than breaking new rock out, and they're also much lighter to transport, and they provide the same structural properties as regular rocks would. Really extraordinary. It's an American company. Then this one was really fascinating to me, because I was like, preparing this presentation, I wanted to tell you that very soon we're going to have hydrogen-powered flight. And then I learned that we have had that for 12 years. So, you know, stupid me. So basically in 2008, Boeing actually took off with a hydrogen-based passenger flight carrying humans. So we are seeing new fuel technologies. We are seeing new ways of powering transportation, which is also one of the major challenges we're seeing. At the same time, alternative fuels are also part of how we're going to leverage the excess renewable energy production. And here's my last slide. We are actually right now able to grow meat in labs, which is quite extraordinary. So apparently I haven't tasted this myself, but it's impossible to tell the difference between this and regular ground beef. So the future is here today, and I think there's nothing left to say, but so long, and thanks for all the fish. If you do want to connect, I'm quite happy to connect on LinkedIn.
Thank you for that, Fred. I really appreciate you showing up so many nice insights that if we would take a look 10 years ago, it would seem impossible. Even we're seeing a lot of cheer up, right, for going vegan. I remember when I was really much against and brought it up this to my family 10 years ago, they were very much against it. And now they are considering, like Meatless Monday, like trying new ingredients from time to time. So it's, I mean, if we are patient enough to insist and see the challenge, the changes that are happening, it is happening for the good. I want to maybe invite everybody, especially the ones that are in the audience, to send questions to our panelists. You guys are welcome to make us any question and we can ramp it up. But I would like to bring back the discussion towards the topic of the event, considering that you guys have amazing career paths. I would like to ask your advices for people that are thinking now about shifting their careers in climate. For you specifically, Frederick, I think it would be interesting to tell about the entrepreneur side, because business, like that are good for the planet is still a dilemma that we're still trying to break, right? So what would you have, like for entrepreneurs that are thinking about that? Is this a good time to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, there are only bad times to be an entrepreneur. I think it's hyper stressful and it's a lot of hard work. So, I mean, only if you're dumb enough to go down this path, I advise you to do it. For me personally, I cannot stop it. I think the entrepreneur celebration is a bit at fault for a lot of young people wasting many years of their lives trying to do something that just doesn't succeed. But that being said, it can be great if that's what you want to do. Yeah, I love the plastic rocks as well. I'll find the company name and post it for you. But basically, I think the question you need to ask yourself is, where do I move the needle the most? And I always ask myself this question: Do I have the most impact working as the CEO of Green Innovation Group, or would I actually do better integrating in a large organization where I have much more muscle? And I continuously come to the answer that I'm moving the needle a bit more here, but eventually, switching into another organization and trying to change it from within, because the time is quite ripe for that right now. But what you need to constantly keep in mind is there an actual business opportunity here? If there's no business in it, then chances are it will not have an impact, because then it's never going to be rolled out. It's never going to have a priority in a budget. And that's a hard truth to face. If you're going into the words to avoid, in my opinion, are CSR and SDGs. If you're going into an organization that prioritizes either CSR or SDG, my uniform experience is that they are not going to have a budget allocated, and it's not tied into to the real core business of the company. If it's not in the core business, it's not going to reduce the core impact of the business. So as Solomon was also touching upon, we need new solutions for concrete. We don't need CSR reporting for concrete. We need to change it.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Frederick. And I think also, like, to get back on the entrepreneurship, we fall in love really much for our ideas, and we often find people trying to find solutions for problems that don't necessarily exist. And I want to invite everybody to take a look on the panel, the first one that we organized for the Day of the Climate Profession, that is related to the future of work, because we definitely need to break paradigms in how we are thinking about new ideas, and how to implement and how we can make them a reality, because we need those we need still those ideas and prototype them, but it is not an easy task, like you brought it up, Frederick. So thank you for that. I want to bring it up, Elena, back for a minute, because I think that you work on a really prestigious organization. So I was very curious to learn about what are the recommendations that you have, and all for people that are interested in working in organizations such as the SDSN.
Sure, yeah. So SDSN is a nonprofit. We're basically part of the international NGO community, and there's a lot of other ones out there. So it's probably good to have a short list of which ones you think are being most impactful or are working in the specific topic that you're interested in. But as far as actually getting there, one thing that I have found really helpful in my career is doing informational interviews and just getting in touch with people and asking questions. Sometimes you think a job sounds like a dream job, and then you actually realize what's involved in it. You might not have the specific skills, or it might not actually be exactly what you want to do. So having conversations where you can really ask, what does the day-to-day look like, and how did you get there? What was your trajectory? And then even just getting into people's heads, when you submit that application, or when that resume comes across their desk, you've already gotten in there. So informational interviewing can be absolutely helpful. And just to follow up on what Frederick was just saying, I also think you have a big opportunity if any of you are still at university. Universities are a great place to get involved with new research and also to incubate solutions. You have basically a living lab that you're living at for 4 years. If you have a new idea or want to get started on something, or are just really passionate about a specific problem, get in touch with a professor, start something with your fellow students. Like, a lot of projects that we've worked on or built on, especially part of our SDSN youth community, have come from universities and from students, which they can later turn into either businesses or incorporate into NGOs that are already operating in this space.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much, Elena. I want to bring it up now, Elizabeth, to answer a question from Lais that I think it connects with what Frederick said about many different solutions that were brought to the table, but maybe you can give an insight about Lais' question, which is how long these solutions will it take so these solutions can become accessible for everybody?
I love it. Thank you so much. And Lais, thanks for the question. What's really great about the research that we do at Project Drawdown is that all of the solutions that we've studied are in hand today for people to implement. So none of these are pie in the sky 10, 20, 30 years, as many of the panelists mentioned. We need to put those climate solutions into place as quickly, safely, and equitably as possible, and we have them. So you don't have to look very far, and there are loads of different solutions and different levels of agency too. I think that's important to remember, right? Like, there are things that, if you're really interested in policy, that maybe lend themselves more towards policy. There are things that fit better in food, agriculture, and land use. And I know Solomon talked about, like, let's incentivize farmers in different ways. So there's all sorts of incredible ways to work. And to Elena's last point, figuring out what levers you really care about, right, and where you fit, and doing those informational interviews. I'll also say one of the ways that I figure out kind of where my path travels for my career is to think about the kinds of problems that I want to solve, because a job is basically solving a bunch of problems every day, right? So when you open up your inbox, email inbox, what kind of problems do you want to solve? Do you want to solve problems that focus on more analytical, data specific content? Do you want to solve problems that are more relational building, about creating partnerships and building relationships? Do you want to do education? There's so many different paths you can choose, and that's really up to all of you in terms of what kind of problems do you want to solve. And then I'll just add one other bit of advice, is that really thinking about what drives you. And for me, I'm driven so much by a cause, right? The cause of climate change. Some people are driven by institutions, right? Like they really care about a particular institution that they want to be with. I'm pretty institution agnostic, right? I really want to work on climate change, and I want to make sure that the institution I work for and with is not a hindrance to that cause. Does that make sense? So I don't want to work for an institution where climate change is not the number one thing we're thinking about. So 2 bits of advice from this side of the camera. One is find the problems that you want to solve and find a way to do that. And then figure out, cause or institution and kind of the balance of those two. And to Laisa's point, we've got these solutions today. We don't have to wait, right? We have the solutions in hand. We know that part of our analysis at Project Drawdown is looking at, are they financially feasible? Are they actually going to either reduce emissions or sequester those heat trapping gases? And are they scalable? So we know that all the solutions work, and we're continually doing research on new solutions all the time.
Thank you for that. Absolutely, yes. Thank you very much. I want to bring now Solomon to answer a question from Mary and Kong about how to make green solutions a priority at a policy level and for business. Simple question.
Yeah. Well, so a lot of it, I think, has to do with the communications. Right now, a lot of people assume that climate action means sacrifice, and communicating more clearly. And this is something that can start with each of us talking with our friends and colleagues and family, but also posting more actively on social media or reaching out to organizations to get them to use better rhetoric, or talk to politicians locally to you and get them to use better rhetoric, and get the media starting to talk, to paint a picture for people of what would solving climate change actually look like. I think many of us have touched on this, that solving climate change would be really good for society. It would create not only a better world than if we don't solve climate change, but a better world than today, cheaper energy and healthier air and more justice and all of these wonderful things, but also painting a picture of how we get there. Are we asking you to change your lifestyle? No, you don't have to stop driving. You have to drive as much as you do now and plug your car in at night. Because we're going to switch the equipment that powers our lifestyles. We're not going to ask you to sacrifice in most cases. And getting people to realize that, I think, is one of the key prerequisites to building the political will, because there are a lot of voters right now in many countries that are wary of climate action. People know it's an issue. They vaguely know we need to take action, and yet they are wary of bold climate action because they think that it might limit their lifestyles. It's not going to limit their lifestyles. Generally, it's going to improve their lifestyles, and it's going to empower people around the world. And so shifting that framing, I think, and this is like the Sunrise Movement has done this with the Green New Deal framing of climate action equals creating jobs. That has started to shift this framing. And I think pushing in that direction in all ways we can is one of the main ways we can help build the political will and make it a policy priority.
Thank you for that. I want to also bring it up, even solutions that might be available in a few countries right now, such as the example in the US about the vegan burgers, for example, right? Like if we would think about this technology 10 years ago, a burger like that would cost about $300, right, to produce it. And now it is available on our shelves. So there's definitely a time frame to consider that. But yes, we're doing much quicker, I think, on that. And I also want to point out that even the new Green Deal is a technology itself, right? Like we do not need only technologies, right? Like gadgets and vegan burgers, that are impossible to be differentiated when you go to lab. There are also YCL. We consider ourselves also a technology because our mission is to gather young people with jobs and telling the path and this, like as a network. So there's also methodology and also a strategy that we consider a technology to help young careers as well. I think that I have most of the comments right now. I want to give maybe a last minute for everybody's considerations before we leave. If you have any final comments, maybe we can start with Frederick, because you have been away from us for a while.
Yeah, final remarks. I mean, we're all in this together, and we really do need to fix this problem before the year 2050. The sooner the better, the more we can do. If you're in doubt of what you can do to change things yourself, then I would say 1, reduce your meat consumption. 2, reduce your flights. 3, move your pension. Then you're doing more than enough and more than what can be expected from you. Also, do vote with your vote. That carries more significance than you voting with your feet. It's not your responsibility as a consumer to stop climate change. It is also the responsibility of the people we elect for parliament and whichever democratic institution we have.
Thank you very much. Maybe Elena, you want to join us this time?
Sure. I'll just maybe reiterate that no matter what sector you want to go into, if you want to work in government, private business, or even academia, we all have a role to play, and sustainability can be realized in different ways in each of those different stakeholder groups. And so while finding your path, just make sure you have your priorities in order, and really just go for it. You can do whatever you want, honestly. It's just about making the right decisions.
Thank you very much. And it's really interesting that you said that, because this was the key message of the Day of the Climate Professional. And I promise that we didn't agree this, like Elena and myself. It's really interesting to see how the dots are being connected and the message is coming across. And thank you very much for your kind comment. I appreciate it. Maybe Solomon, you want to wrap it up for us?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, everyone, for engaging with this. And I agree with what everyone else is saying. Vote and engage in larger collective action. Become, even if it's only an hour a week, be active in an organization like the Sunrise Movement, or find your other ways of building some communications power and getting people to think more boldly and more solutions-orientedly about climate change. And keep in mind the need to get on a track that adds up all the way by 2050.
Fingers crossed. Thank you for that. And I want to wrap it up now with Elizabeth. Maybe you can give us a last comment before we wrap it up for the day.
Absolutely.
This panel.
Thanks so much. And huge gratitude to all the panelists who shared their incredible insights today. Y'all, you're not alone, right? None of us are alone, and the weight of the world is not on any one person's shoulders. And I think you've heard that today, that we all really have the opportunity, the invitation, and the obligation to step forward and really put climate solutions into place in whatever way works for you. Another way that we talk about it at Project Drawdown is behind me, these from the Drawdown review, we call them accelerators, right? There's a number of different ways that we can accelerate getting these solutions into place. Things from shaping culture, building power, setting goals, altering rules and policy. I won't read them all, but they're all on our website. And there's a place for all of us there, right? You don't have to do a climate march if that's not what makes you comfortable. Maybe you love phone banking. Maybe you love talking to your local restaurant about the food that they're serving. But find where you can plug in and go all in. And we're so grateful that all of you are here with us on this third rock from the sun at this incredible moment in history.
Thank you very much. I want to wrap it up just to reply the Green Seeds question about, yes, Brazil is going through a really difficult challenge, and it's pretty difficult because in Brazil, deforestation, it is the biggest responsible for the emissions of Brazil, that unfortunately, while the rest of the world might have decreased a little bit because of the COVID crisis, Brazil increased its emissions. So to give some context about Brazil, indeed, we need to protect our forests. And right now, we have a government that is not really on our side in terms of climate action. We are seeing immense stress between organizations and governments, and why not saying the agribusiness, which is one of the key, players in this crisis. And if I want to talk about like a solution that you can do right now, is definitely supporting organizations that are there. We know hundreds of organizations that are doing an amazing job right now to see that climate action, of course, that is done by voting, of course, but you can also use your time, you can use your financial resources to support, and also to bring awareness to this organization, and be very loud and clear that you do not agree with these positions, because these organizations are actually needing us very much right now. So I want to wrap it up by saying, supporting organizations, I mean, you can contact YCL for getting recommendations and others of them, but around the world, we are seeing that we need to support these organizations, and kind of wrap it up the fact that they are, you know, like not doing a work, and their work is actually what is not making it much worse, defending science, and not like defending organizations that are doing a great job on that. So I want to thank you, everybody, for your time, for your inspiring ideas and sharing your stories, and connect. You know, like I hope that you guys that are listening to us felt connected, and we invite you all to connect with everybody afterwards, and to connect with YCL. Last but not least, if you have the chance to support YCL, we have a link also to donate. Since the Day of the Climate Professional is a free initiative that has been empowered by young people to young people for you. I really appreciate if you could consider donating for us. But thank you again. I will wrap it up for now. And I hope you guys can continue for the rest of the evening, because we still have 20 more to go. Good day. Thank you.